So today we are going to talk about the path and the life. And we're going to talk about those two things and then follow up on the back of those with a detailed explanation of the method for the disintegration of the ego, or at least two methods. There's many methods, but we're going to stick with these two because they're the most fundamental and the most how can I put it? Straightforward to apply in our daily life. Okay, so let's begin. Um, the path and the life. We learned last week that we have relationships with the external world. Obviously, we have relationships with our own physical body, and we have a relationship with our internal world. That's a combination of our psychological country, which is the domain of the ego because we don't know our internal world that well. And also it's the place where our essence is located on our inner being. And we can go on to say, well, that inner being, we were talking about this last week. The inner being is for the benefit of the talk or the talks we do, we say it's located in the heart, our inner being, our inner God, our inner guru, our intimate part, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, our inner being can enter our physical body in any way, no problem at all, but it chooses to reside in the heart. That's like the seat, you could say, of our inner being and where our essence resides and manifests from time to time. So, our inner being in itself is made up of many autonomous parts, but we today are focusing on the Divine Mother or our own individual inner mother, that aspect of the unfolding of God within us, which is the feminine, the divine feminine aspect. It's in everybody. So she's known as Mary or Isis, many other names we talked about a few weeks ago. But for us, fundamentally, again, we're going to call or refer to our Divine Mother as Divai Kundalini. So Divai Kundalini is the sort of, you may hear me mention that phrase rather than saying the Divine Mother or vice versa. Okay, so let's carry on to say the role or the main roles of our inner mother are to guide us on our spiritual path and development, to protect us in our inner work, and to eliminate egos through the practice of the psychological death. That's her main roles. We can, at any time of the day, any time of night, whenever we want, we feel we need to talk to her, we can talk to her. Just make a petition or a prayer, whatever you want to call it. Just have some words with your Divine Mother. You don't need to have a prescriptive set of phrases. You just say what you mean. Say it from the heart. She will listen and she will help, and you will know that she is helping because of the subsequent actions, processes, and feelings that you get inside. So, talking about this thing called the path and the life itself is very, you could say, flat. It's horizontal because we are born, we go through our child life, our adolescence life, our adult life. We may have a family, we may go to work, we may become a very successful pop singer, or we may be a car mechanic, or we might just be a philosopher of life, whatever, and then we die. That is the horizontal part, which has no internal aspect. It's about money, materialism, it's about family, it's about the search for happiness. Maybe most people can't find that happiness. Just realized that pen, I've turned that pen on. Right. Um, and that is more or less the way we exist as a humanity. We are born, we live, and then we die in a very mechanical way. And we could say very coldly that our life is therefore hollow and empty from a spiritual point of view, because all these things, all these events, all these issues that come and go in our daily life just come and go in our daily life. And at the end, we die. There is no internal aspect. And because of that, as we've mentioned previously on the course or in these sessions, we are victims of circumstance in as much as whenever an ego manifests based on the impression that is coming into us in that particular moment, and we are identified with it, it manifests and we, through the ego, react, whether we feel something, think something, or act in some way. And that means when we do that, when we react, because the ego is manifesting through us, all we're doing is being mechanical people reacting in a prescribed way. In other words, the ego knows what we're going to do because we're identified, and we become victims of circumstance because what we or how we react in any moment will then cause the next set of impressions to come into us, and our inner state, which whether we're whether we're angry or whether we're feeling sarcastic or whether we're feeling lustful in that moment, all that will do is make us behave in another set of ways, thoughts, feelings, and actions. So we are victims of circumstance. And in our daily life, we find that there are a lot of recurring themes and events. You know, we don't like our boss, and the next day we don't like our boss, and the next week we don't like our boss, and then we change jobs and we find that we don't like our boss, etc., etc. The daily repetitions, really, you could say, from a philosophical point of view, each day is a kind of compressed version or a microcosm of our entire life, our entire horizontal life. So it could be, for example, even looking down the railway track or the road or the footpath, we see something coming in our life. Oh, I'm going to get married in 2 years' time. And then we go through all the planning and all the build up to the event, and we actually get to the event and something is missing. Something doesn't feel there, or maybe something is not quite happening the way we expected it to happen through our 2 years of planning. That's because in those 2 years, we have not been in the moment. We have been projecting forward 2 years to that event, and all the corresponding egos have manifested through that projection over those 2 years. So when we actually get to the event, something feels as though it's missing. But on the other hand, in our daily life, on this horizontal path, sometimes something unexpected happens. Like, for example, we could be in the park, sat on a bench, and some birds come down. A sparrow sits on your hand or sits on your coat or something. You feel something different. There's great pleasure in that unexpected moment. In other words, if we live in the moment, our life becomes spontaneous as we go through this horizontal path rather than being mechanical. Okay, so this is the life. But on the other hand, in the title, you'll probably remember, if I can get this to go on. Come on. We have the vertical aspect. The vertical part of our life takes us to a spiritual development with the help of our Divine Mother, Diva Kundalini. Because the vertical path is about knowledge, is something which will give us happiness, freedom, peace. And you can see on the right-hand side, I've just added in the architect we mentioned last week, who is the inner father within us. So that you could say those two are together, the inner being. But for us, as students of Gnosis, the important thing is that the vertical part is really where we need to be trying to move. We need to try to climb the vertical path in any moment. But it's a hard path to climb because we have a lot of egos within us which want to drag us down, or at least to the flat part of the horizontal life. And it's a hard path because as students of Gnosis, from a a philosophical point of view, we need to go beyond rules, beyond norms. We even need to go beyond good and bad because they are just concepts. And what we need to do is live in the moment. So, for example, we know that water, the liquid, is really good for us. Water, we're made of water, it's really great stuff. But we can have too much water with a flood, for example. And we also come to the conclusion that there are many false paths which we can travel along vertically or horizontally as we go through our life. But the point is that in any moment, we carry the means to be able to walk in the vertical, to move upwards spiritually. Okay. And that comes down to deciding whether we want to be in the moment consciously with our essence active, or we want to just mechanically move along the horizontal. So we can draw this out like this. We have our own ladder, you could say, or method to climb in the vertical. And this brings us to this scenario. You can see in that cross at the bottom of the page or the image that in the middle of the cross, we have in any moment a choice. So that moment is here and now as we are. Each one of us is in our own particular yellow blob, if you can call it that. We are living our horizontal life, and we are also, as students of Gnosis, trying to move up the path, up the vertical path, in other words, to spiritually advance. So as we go along our horizontal life, we have the moments, the events, and the states, which are those little lines there. You can see the little lines on the cross going along. And in this particular moment, any one of those events or states will occur in front of our life. You know, if we're hungry, we're going to feel a certain way. That's in a state. And then that makes us go to the pie shop. Or maybe it makes us go and get an apple. Or maybe it makes us go and make some bread at home because we're a good cook, for example. That's the horizontal part. But in that moment, are we conscious? Are we using the key soul to awaken that consciousness in that moment? Because if we're not, we will become identified with the horizontal life. If we decide to awaken consciousness, we will begin to move vertically as we live our horizontal life. So, as you would expect, moving in the vertical is a very tricky thing to do because we need to be in the moment at all times. It's very easy to get lost on the vertical path. It's very easy to lose our way, to even leave the vertical path temporarily by mistake. We lose ourselves. We come to many dead ends. And a lot of those dead ends in the vertical path are generated by morals, values, and things like that. Things we have learnt in our horizontal life. So, for example, we may decide that it's not a good thing to go down that particular road and across that park because of the conditioning we've received over many years. And it could be the opposite. It could be that it's a fantastic opportunity to go across that park at this moment because we get to see a lovely sunset, for example, an inspirational sunset. So in that moment, we will have the choice between moving horizontally or moving horizontally and vertically at the same time. So the values and the morals and the codes we have act as, you could say, filters or barriers within our vertical path to keep us imprisoned on this horizontal life, this horizontal, boring rat run. And to move in that vertical path, therefore, becomes, as we've already said, very difficult, very tricky. And Master Samael refers to it as the path of the razor's edge. Okay? This very narrow path we have to walk in our daily life because in that narrow path, we are in the moment. And remember what we said a few weeks ago, if we are in the moment, we are in the permanent now. Okay? The permanent now is where we need to try to be so that how we react, consciously react, how we react to all those events and states, impressions, issues that come to us during our daily life on the horizontal, how we react to them consciously is the way which would enable us to move vertically up the path. And the question is, who is on this vertical path? Well, everyone who looks inward and searches. And in that search, they are shining the light of their consciousness into the darkness of the psychological country. In other words, how they're going to react in any moment to any particular impression that comes in. So if we decide to work on ourselves as students of Gnosis, if we decide to move vertically or try to move vertically, or at least try to move away from the horizontal part, then that means our life will begin to change. If we are mechanical creatures and we have a bunch of egos inside us which always make us behave a certain way, how we react to the particular politician or how we feel when the England cricket team lose, or how we behave when we're on the beach and where we decide to sit and what direction we're going to look when we're on the beach and all those details. If we start to change them, then we're going to change our life, and we can say we'll change our life for the better. If you remember, the external is a reflection of the internal. Some of the guys have been saying that on the WhatsApp group. And we can say that there, with no identification with any particular issue in our horizontal life, then that means that our vertical life will start to change, because if the external is a reflection of the internal, if we are internally serene, at peace, calm, assertive rather than reactive, for example, then that state of being, that inner state, will radiate out, reflect outwards to all of life around us, and therefore our life will start to change. And another way to look at this is to say that we would start to move away from the humdrum rat run repetition of work, of drudge, of mechanicity, and that will lead us to freedom and control. So rather than existing in our life, we will live our life. We're not saying that if we have a bad job we will automatically be relocated into a good job. What we're saying is that attitude towards that situation will change, which will generate events and states making us or allowing us to move away from that particular job in that particular example. So we work on ourselves and our life begins to change. And that means we need to know, with a capital K, we need to know what life is. And we can find out what life is by working on ourselves. Because if we start to know, we are obviously gaining knowledge from being actively, consciously in the moment. And we gain from that this knowledge which enables us to move vertically. So therefore, to know our life is the beginning of working on ourselves and vice versa. So what does that mean? It means that the path, the vertical, is conscious, is not mechanical. It's not mechanical, excuse me. And if we are in the moment, aligned and ubicated with our inner being, remember we talked about ubication a few times so far. If we are applying the three factors of the revolution of the consciousness, which we'll come on to in a moment, we are gaining self-knowledge. And in that knowledge, that self-knowledge, there is no necessity for moral codes. Okay. We are beginning to carry out what Master Samael calls the revolution of the consciousness. We are beginning to form within us a radical change, radical with a capital R, radical change. Okay. But at the same time, we need to work on ourselves now and not to dream about the future. Oh, I'd love to be a really good Gnostic student. I would love to be able to apply the three factors. Oh, I would love to be able to apply the key soul and be in the moment. Because all we do then is one ego is generating concepts about other moments, which is future conceptions, basically. In other words, we're losing our own opportunity. And this leads us to what Master Samael calls the illness of tomorrow. So the illness of tomorrow is when we say to ourselves, yeah, I'll do that practice tomorrow. Yeah, I won't do, and then the morning comes, I'll do the practice later. I just need to get 10 more minutes under the duvet. I don't need to do the practice until after I've had my breakfast, and then we have the breakfast. Oh, maybe I'll do this a bit later on, and I'll have a go at trying to do the vocalizations tomorrow because I feel better tomorrow. I'll be in some other place. I won't be in this house. I'll be in a different house. And so all we do is put off the work. We put off the inner work we are trying to do. Again, another ego manifesting within us. You could even say it's a good ego because it's very nice and chumly to us. It makes us feel warm and cozy. I'll do it tomorrow. It'll be all right. Well, actually, all it is a defense mechanism from the egos, putting us off the inner work, taking us away from the vertical path. And so, therefore, this leads us to the fact that we need to create this revolution of the consciousness, okay, which is objective real knowledge. Okay. And all this brings us to the fact that we need to take the bull by the horns. I don't know if you know that phrase. To take the bull by the horns is where you say, right, this is what I need to do. I'm going to grab it and go with it. We need to examine our faults, our egos. We need to be honest with ourselves. We need to see what is the cause of our suffering and then eliminate it. We need to eliminate those egos so that with the radical change we're making, we can conquer freedom and find peace. So this is a conscious work. It goes against life in a way, against the horizontal, because it's trying to lift us out of that horizontal and moving vertically. Obviously, we still live doesn't matter how far we go vertically, we're still going to live horizontally because we're all going to die in the end at some point. So let's continue with this slideshow. You remember these three factors. Um, we talked about them pretty well every week. Hopefully now you've all understood that they exist. And in the middle, that square inside the triangle is supposed to be a representation of the consciousness being awake, because with the awakened consciousness, we're able to carry out these three factors of the revolution of the consciousness. And you'll remember this image where we talked about the observer and the observed. So again, that free consciousness, which is on the left-hand side of the circle, is awake psychologically, is looking at the way in which the egos manifest through the thoughts and the feelings and the actions. Okay, so we have the observer and the observed. Bearing all that in mind, we can move on to the next part. Hopefully, everybody, you're all okay with that. I'm just going to continue because there's a lot to talk about tonight. Yeah. So we need to consider in this analogy that any ego is like a tree. So we're going to start from the point of view that any ego is similar to a tree in as much as how it exists. Okay, so here's a tree with the roots. And how does that tree gain nourishment? It gains it primarily through those roots. And you can see, like for any tree, that there is very big, thick roots which are structurally holding up the tree. And then there is finer roots, and then ultimately there is very thin roots or fibrous roots, okay, in the tree. As you can see there with the guy, he's holding some of those fibrous roots. In fact, they look like that ultimately. So these fibrous roots, which are on any particular tree or in the root system of any particular tree, they are how the tree gains nourishment, takes in minerals, takes in water, takes in whatever trees eat, I don't know. And it goes through those hairy, fibrous roots first before it goes eventually up to the trunk and then up the tree to feed the leaves, etc. We all know this, but we can consider that an ego is very similar. The fibrous, thin, hairy roots are how the tree or the ego gets its nourishment. So if we want to eliminate any particular ego, in other words, any particular tree in this analogy, we can start to look at the way in which the tree gains nourishment or the ego gains energy. Okay. Okay. So we know that from previous talks and what we showed earlier, that the ego manifests through the five centers of the human machine. You can see that there, that image. You've seen that before many times. Okay. This part of the work we're going to talk about is called death in motion or death on the march. You may see it described in those two different ways by Master Samael in the books, which we're going to refer to later. Okay, so the death in motion, which is the name we'll use, death in motion is where, as we go through our day, psychologically living our day, as we go through that horizontal life, as we find ourselves reacting to certain situations, if we are in the moment, we are able to observe the ego, any particular ego, trying to manifest through those five inferior centers, or one or two or three, any combination of those five inferior centers. Okay, so it could be that we're angry and we start off with the gut feeling. We get something twinging in the gut, and we feel like butterflies, you could say, or we feel tensed up inside, twisted inside, and then we might feel a feeling of anxiety, or this anger may manifest in many different ways as a feeling, and then eventually it comes as a thought, and we feel that how dare that person do that to me, How dare he say that to me? What have I done to deserve that? He's the one who's wrong. I'm always right. This is the ego manifesting through those centers, and what's it doing? It's taking energy. Okay, that's how the ego feeds. And in any moment of our daily life, that could be through any one of those details, very small aspects or parts of the ego that manifests. So, thinking back to the analogy of the tree, the fibrous roots of the tree are the same as the details of the ego. So, for example, sarcasm, as an example, sarcasm is linked very much to the ego of anger. Okay, it has a nexus linking it to the ego of anger. So sarcasm, even though it's for detail, we take the mickey out of someone or be ironic with somebody or sarcastic to somebody in any just sort of throwaway moment. What's happened in that detail is that the energy has fed, excuse me, the ego has fed through the feelings and through the thoughts and then through the motor center because we spoke and then through the instinctive part because of how we were behaving physically at that moment when we spoke, our posture, our movements, etc., etc. So those details which manifest literally from moment to moment, which is why in the group I said try some observer and observe, and you'll start to see the detail, to start to see how much the egos are manifesting through us continuously. Okay, we start to see that. So in any moment when that occurs, we can ask our Divine Mother directly by making a petition. So if we are in the moment, if we are ubicated, but primarily in the moment, we see the ego of sarcasm as a thought, okay, or as a action when we say the sarcasm, okay. In that moment, okay, we can ask our Divine Mother to eliminate that ego precisely. Okay. We don't have, there's no set words. We don't have to imagine any phrases or anything like that. We just ask our Divine Mother in whichever words we want. Eliminate that ego, my Divine Mother. Eliminate it. Eliminate it. Okay. And we can even imagine fire involved. So you imagine that fire, you can say, my Divine Mother, burn that ego, we could say, for example. But it's totally up to you, totally up to you how you do it. So you ask the inner mother in that moment, our Mother Divine Kundalini, to eliminate that ego. And we need to obviously do this with faith. It is something where we need to know that if we ask our Divine Mother to eliminate the ego, she will eliminate that ego. But this is the detail. Okay, she will eliminate that detail in that moment. This is why it's called death in motion. As we move through our day, the psychological death is occurring from moment to moment as any particular ego is trying to manifest through the inferior centers. We ask our Divine Mother to eliminate it. We don't need to say to our Divine Mother, oh, this is the ego of so and so, and it's doing this and it's doing that. We don't, this practice, we don't need to do that. All we need to do is observe the ego and ask our Divine Mother to eliminate that ego in that moment. Okay. And it's a process. It takes a few milliseconds to do the practice here, but over time, those details, all those hairy, fibrous roots will start to reduce. And in the example we've used of anger, so those fibrous roots will start to minimize or become less in our psychology. So that is the practice of death in motion. Very simple practice, but very effective, very direct It needs us to be in the moment. It needs us to be awake psychologically. We cannot do it mentally. It needs to be done consciously. Ask our Divine Mother, eliminate that ego, however it's manifesting in that moment. Okay. And now we're going to talk about a bit more. Okay. Um, You remember last week we talked about the way in which we need to understand the egos within before we can actually eliminate the egos. So in the practice of the death in motion, because we're looking at the fibrous, tiny details of the egos manifesting moment to moment to moment, when we observe one, we've understood it enough for it to be eliminated. Okay, because um, it's like a hair. We've seen it, eliminated it, and it's gone it's frazzled into nothing. Okay, but we also, if you remember last week, talked about this thing called retrospection. So at the end of the day, we need to do a practice called retrospection to start to see how the egos were manifesting in us during the day. Okay. And we start to see that uh, if we have been in the moment and if we have been applying the death in motion, the previous practice, we will be able to do the retrospection much more effectively because we have been conscious and active through the day, eliminating ego or asking our inner mother to eliminate ego as we go through the day, which means when we do the retrospection, we will remember so much more or be able to review and recall so much more because we have been conscious for so many more moments through the day. When we do the retrospection and we see the death in motion moments, it's like a camera flash. When a flash goes off, that's when we were in the moment, and then another flash goes off. Oh, we were in the moment during that moment, etc., etc. So let's see how this goes. To sit, we need to relax for the retrospection. We need to focus. So the retrospection requires us to begin in this moment when we're doing the practice, in this moment, working backwards through the day. Okay. Review the day from this moment going backwards. Why? Because if we go forwards, it'll come to very end, practice will go very short distance. But if we go backwards, we remember a lot more things maybe in previous days. We notice all the movements when we were identified or fascinated. And at the same time, now that we know the practice of death in motion, we will notice all the moments when we applied the death with our Divine Mother in that moment. Okay. So it becomes very beneficial to do the retrospection. But we need to remember in the practice that when we do the retrospection, we need to do it without reliving the same ego situation or event. So we don't need or want to be in a situation where we are observe what's the word, reviewing our day, okay, and then suddenly we become attached or reattached to the same ego, and we get angry again when we're doing the retrospection practice. We're getting resentful about the person we had the argument with 3 4 hours ago, reliving that same moment because the ego is not dead within us, it's not died within us. And instead, what's going to happen is that we get identified again during the practice of the retrospection. So we need, therefore, to be as though we're in the audience, okay, and we're looking on the stage, and the stage has all the actors of our day. They're all doing the same things they did during our day and how they manifest, what they do, all these different egos, how they manifest and what they do during our day. We observe or we review from the point of being a member of an audience in an auditorium looking at our day. Okay, so it's without attachment. All right. Then we're going to carry out this thing called ego analysis. So, as you can see, this requires us to use our conscious imagination. And we imagine a courtroom. I don't know which courtroom this is, but you can imagine this or any other courtroom you know of, or can imagine whatever it is. Well, you just imagine it, doesn't matter. A courtroom. And in that courtroom, we have our Divine Mother, Divai Kundalini, who is there as the judge for this particular case. There she is. And we have the ego. The ego is in the dock, as you can see there on the left-hand side. So the ego goes into the dock using our conscious imagination, and the ego is the one we have selected from the retrospection. So the retrospection is where we see the pattern or the repeating ego or any particular strong ego that's come in our day, and then we choose that and we place it in the dock of the courtroom. And our Divine Mother is there, like you can see. And then we are now going to tell our Divine Mother everything we understand about that particular ego. Okay, what does this mean? It means we have information about how the ego manifested in our day, because we're able to see how it impacted our mood, how it made us feel, how it made us think and act, obviously, but also how it impacted other people. And we tell our Divine Mother everything, everything we understand about that particular ego, how it operates. So does it operate through my mind, or does it operate through my feelings, etc.? Does it operate in my instinctive center and all my hairs go up on my arms? When does it operate? Does it only operate when I drive my car, or does it only operate when I see the person with the red hat, for example? Okay. Where does it operate? Does it operate when I'm at work, or does it operate when I'm shopping or in the theater, whatever it is? We're telling our mother everything we understand about this particular ego, okay, and its impacts on us. So we can say to my divine, yes, it really gives me a headache. It drains on my mind, on my intellectual center, because I am thinking, overthinking, worrying about this particular thing. So it's impacting me, giving me headaches. I'm very stressed out, very anxious all the time. We need to tell our inner mother everything we know and understand, how it impacts other people. So maybe if we're feeling the way we feel because of anger, it might hurt or feel or impact on other people in our family or in our close surroundings or in our daily life, whoever it is. How does it impact on them? We tell our Divine Mother everything. And then, if we can tell her the cause of the ego, why the ego is there, the reason for the ego. And in that analysis, in that analytical process, it can be very clear after a while, the cause of the ego, the mechanicity which generated the ego in the first place. We tell our Divine Mother all of this because we are giving her understanding. We give our Divine Mother understanding in this practice. Okay, so as you can tell, this is now starting to be a big practice. The death in motion was a practice which happens in the moment, but this practice, the analysis or the annihilation or the elimination of the ego itself, okay, so we're talking about the tree in the example, okay, this is much more profound and it needs to be done at the end of the day. We've already talked about the fact that we begin with the retrospection and how to do that. Then we do this ego analysis. And so we've given our Divine Mother up to this point our understanding about this particular ego. Now we need to think about Gnostic meditation. Gnostic meditation is like any other meditation in some ways. We need to think about the way our mind operates. Generally, most of the time, most people have many thoughts, as you can see. It's the normal state of humanity. When we concentrate, we have one thought. And in the course so far, we've done a few concentration practices with the view to enable us to learn what it's like to have one thought. Okay, whether it's the concentration on the heart or concentration on a particular issue. We talked about the pyramids, for example, and we talked about the astral. But we can concentrate on the candle. We can concentrate on a mantra or on a vocalization. That's fine. But what we're talking about now in meditation is to have no thoughts. Meditation is where the mind is completely still with no thoughts. Some schools and some teachings say that relaxation gives us meditation. Some people say that concentration is meditation, just having one thought. What we are talking about in this school, in these classes, is the meditation has no thoughts, because we must remember what we talked about a few weeks ago. Every thought has a thinker. So if that's the case, then it's quite likely that there's an ego in there somewhere having that thought. We are trying to have no thoughts. We are disconnecting from the ego. We, the consciousness, the essence, is doing the practice of meditation, and there is no thoughts. We just are. We are there in that practice, and that is all. Okay? Okay, so there are various types of meditation. You can see there's the Buddhist, the Hindu, Chinese, etc., Sufi, Christian, Sikhs, and many, many different types and names of meditations, which is fine. But in this school, in these classes, we're going to talk about two types of meditation. The first one, which I'm sure you've all heard of, samadhi, or transcendental meditation, where we go to the what is called the illuminator void, which is to basically go beyond. We are going to go out of the physical into superior dimensions, away from the ego. The ego cannot manifest in the illuminator void. Okay, that is one type of meditation, but it's a sort of standard, usual type of meditation which other schools and teachings give, which is fine. We do the same. However, this particular type of meditation is not considered by many schools contemplative meditation. So we go into a meditation with the view to gain knowledge. Okay. And if we're not going to think, if we're going to have zero thoughts, then that knowledge, or let's use the word information, which we're going to gain in the contemplative meditation, is going to be given to us by our inner being, by our Divine Mother in this case. So normally our mind is like this, loads of stuff going on rather than a clear, clean mind or screen, we have lots of clouds going across it. We don't want to be in a situation where we do a meditation practice and we just generate more and more clouds in our mind. What we need to do is try to move even beyond one thought. Okay. And that will lead us to having no thoughts at all, so that our mind is completely calm and serene, with the help of our Divine Mother, Diva Kundalini. Okay, how do we achieve this? Well, in the practice of contemplative meditation, we need to let every thought, say it's a singular cloud on the left bottom corner, let that cloud dissipate or move away. Don't get involved with it. Don't get involved with the thought. In other words, let every thought pass like a cloud. We are focusing on the practice of having no thoughts. We are in this practice of meditation, listening to the reply, if you will, of our Divine Mother. Well, what does this mean? Let's take a look. Contemplative meditation. We need to sit in a comfortable position with our back straight. Some people do it like that. I don't know why she's got a blanket there, but it achieves logically this version, as we mentioned already. Well, what we need to do is come to a contemplative meditation, as you can see here, beyond time, which is the sundial, beyond ourselves. We are just in the moment, but not necessarily, well, we won't be brightly awake. We are going to be drowsy with the practice of the meditation we're going to do. But in that state of drowsiness, we're able to find that contemplative meditation. So in the practice, what do? We ask our Divine Mother for that which is beyond understanding about the particular ego. This is the purpose of the contemplative meditation. It is to comprehend the ego. So we have told her everything we understand. Remember in the courtroom, we told our Divine Mother everything we understand. Now we ask her for comprehension. So comprehension is more superior to understanding. For example, someone might say, "Okay, what's that?" And we all point at the road. Could be a normal standard road. We all look at the road, and we can say, "Yes, my inner mother, I can understand that road. It's very flat, and it goes over there, and it's coloured grey, and it's made of stones, and there's some oil in there sometimes, and it's for cars, and that's about it." That's the understanding we have about the road. Okay. But our Divine Mother gives us the comprehension. She will say, well, that road connects you to this town and that town. Or you could say that psychological place and this psychological place. Or when you were 5 years old, you did this, and this is why this ego manifests here and now as that. She links it up. She gives you the comprehension. It's like the global knowledge of the ego. Okay. And it could be that she gives you comprehension about a tiny moment or comprehension about the entire life cycle of that particular ego since the moment you created it to the here and now. In other words, comprehension is vastly superior to understanding, but it does not require the intellect. It comes from beyond. It comes from our Divine Mother. She will give us that comprehension. We need to let all the thoughts pass like clouds. So when we make the petition to our Divine Mother at the beginning of the contemplative meditation, we say, "My Divine Mother, please give me comprehension about that particular ego." We need to just wait for her response. Okay. Her response will come to us as intuition, inspiration, a conscious memory, for example. In other words, the language of the being is intuition, inspiration. Do you remember those superior centers of the human machine we talked about, those red dots we talked about a few weeks ago? She will manifest and give us the answers through intuition, through inspiration. Okay, so the comprehension will come to us in the practice through those roots from our Divine Mother. So any thoughts that come, let them pass like a cloud, because as we've already said, every thought has a thinker. So that is egoic. Don't identify with it. Don't get hooked up with it. Just let the thought go like a cloud and continue to be serenely calm, receiving the comprehension from our Divine Mother. It might be that we need, in the practice, it could be 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10, 25, half an hour, 45 minutes before we get anything. But in that moment, when it comes, our Divine Mother will give us the comprehension. And now suddenly we know so much more about that ego in that dock, in that courtroom. Okay. Because we have comprehension. The comprehension is what we need. Without comprehension, the Divine Mother will not eliminate ego. So the comprehension we gained in the death in motion is tiny. We just were able to give her comprehension of that particular moment. But in this practice, the Divine Mother is giving us comprehension of the entire manifestation of that particular ego. Okay. But she will only give us to it based on what we've observed. If we haven't observed the whole thing, the whole ego manifesting in us, then she'll give us a sort of step towards us, excuse me, a step towards it. It won't necessarily be the whole ego of anger in our example, but she'll give a good chunk of information or comprehension about that. And she will also give us information about the way in which the roots of anger in that tree overlap or coincide with the roots of, I don't know, pick another one, pick a lust or something like that. So we start to see more and understand more about how our psychology actually works with this comprehension. So now we've gained the comprehension in the practice. What do? We need to ask our inner mother to eliminate that ego. Okay. So now in the day, we were doing death in motion, bam, bam, bam. As we go through the day, we observe, bam, bam, and we ask our inner mother to eliminate. Fine. That's the details. That's the fibrous roots. Now we are going to ask her to either chop down the tree or take out a good chunk of all those roots and branches on that tree. Okay, that egoic aspect. So we need to ask her and know that she will do it. Okay, she will eliminate that ego for us in that moment. Okay, and what do we ask? We ask her, classically, Master Samael says you need to ask her to throw her or hurl her burning spear against that particular ego. But in the practice, in the courtroom, from the image in the courtroom, the ego was in the dock. You can imagine that ego. You can imagine a burning spear or fire or whatever you want, anything at all. You imagine reducing that ego down into cosmic dust. It becomes cosmic dust in the practice that we do. Okay. Then once that's done, the essence which was trapped inside that ego. Remember, that's what happens with all the essences trapped within ego. You remember? That essence is now going to coalesce or join up with you, as in the essence which is doing this practice. So the active essence doing the practice will now grow a bit, get a bit more brighter, you could say, in the practice. And then we thank our Divine Mother for the help she's given us with that practice. Okay, so let's just carry on. Techniques for the psychological death. The death in motion or death on the march we've already talked about. Our Divine Mother, two different images of our Divine Mother. In that moment, we ask our inner mother to eliminate the ego. As we go through the day, we observe and we ask her to eliminate. This is the practice we've just described. Okay, I'll put this in the group as well. It's a big practice. To be honest with you, this practice would take a minimum half an hour because of all the steps. but the master recommends that we all do this every day, and generally it would take an hour. Okay. And we do it towards the end of the day because the retrospection is going to take us backwards through that day. And you can see the steps we just talked about. Okay. You can imagine, you can see the courtroom there where we do the ego analysis. We tell our inner mother everything we understand. It's like a courtroom. Imagine it like that. That's how the master recommends it. And we then do the contemplative meditation, which we've just referred to. How we do that, we ask our inner mother to give us that comprehension, and we wait for her reply in the meditation. So we are not going to put anything into our head. Let the thoughts pass like clouds. We are waiting for her to give us the comprehension of the ego, which we have just been talking to or talking about in the courtroom, what we saw in the retrospection, what we saw in the observe it on the observed during the day. Then we ask our Divine Mother to eliminate the ego. We thank our inner mother, and then we can open our eyes. Okay. I think that might be the end.